Hi guys. Hi guys. Let's start this video of a plane crash. Oh, I've got the water. Three.
On July 19, 1989, United Airlines Flight 232 takes off from Denver, Colorado, heading towards Chicago. It's been nearly an hour since departure, and the plane is now flying over Iowa with a sunny, clear sky and relatively no turbulence. By all accounts, it's a routine flight with two very experienced pilots and one flight engineer in the cockpit. The plane is on autopilot and is now doing a turn towards a heading of 95 degrees. But then, suddenly, with a violent jolt, everything changes. The plane is a DC-10, and it is outfitted with three engines, one underneath each wing and a third at the base of the tail fin towards the back of the plane. After hearing and feeling the explosive bang, flight engineer Dudley Dvorak reports that it is the rear engine that has failed. Co-pilot William Rickards takes control of the plane as Captain Alfred Haynes begins an engine shutdown checklist. As Captain Alfred Haynes begins an engine shutdown checklist. Though it is alarming to lose an engine mid-flight, it isn't the worst-case scenario. The DC-10 is designed to still be able to fly even if only two engines are operational. And so, the crew is able to cut off power to the damaged engine and turn their attention to steadying the plane back out. But this is when they realize just how bad the situation actually is. Because even though the plane is able to continue flying, co-pilot Rickards reports that none of the controls are working. Captain Haynes attempts to manipulate the controls as well and confirms that nothing seems to be functional. While the two pilots continue flying to see why the plane isn't responding to the controls, flight engineer Dvorak comes up with their answer. The plane has lost all hydraulic fluid. Hydraulic fluid is needed for nearly every control output on the plane. For example, in order to make a plane bang to the left, a pilot will turn the control column to the left, causing the left aileron to move up and the right aileron to move down. The hydraulic fluid is a pressurized liquid that allows these ailerons to move up and down once the control column is moved. If there's no fluid, there's no pressure that forces this movement, no matter how hard the control column is turned left or right. Now, because hydraulic pressure is so vital to flying a plane, there are actually three separate hydraulic lines that run through a DC-10. These hydraulic systems are independent from one another, so that if one should fail, there are two others that can continue providing hydraulic power. There is no procedure to follow should all three fail, because the likelihood of this happening was thought to be 1 in a billion, virtually impossible. And with no hydraulic fluid left, the plane begins banking to the right. If this continues,
I'm back at another place.
there are actually three separate hydraulic lines that run through a DC-10. These hydraulic systems are independent from one another, so that if one should fail, there are two others that can continue providing hydraulic power. There is no procedure to follow should all three fail, because the likelihood of this happening was thought to be 1 in a billion, virtually impossible. And with no hydraulic fluid left, the plane begins banking to the right. If this continues, the plane is in danger of fully rolling over. A situation that there's no recovering from. Flight 232 will crash. Thinking quickly, Captain Haynes realizes that even without hydraulic fluid, they still have at least one control that they can manipulate: the engine throttles. By decreasing the power to the left engine, Haynes is able to slowly level the plane back out. And with the immediate danger addressed, the crew can now turn their attention to the bigger issue. They have no way to fly this plane. Now, what the flight crew don't realize is that even though all three hydraulic lines run separately, There is one section in the back of the plane where they come within close proximity, near the rear engine. Later investigations will reveal that within the engine, a fan disc had been produced using metal that was not completely pure, and this manufacturing defect went unnoticed. A crack began to form with each flight the aircraft took, until finally the disc couldn't hold anymore and broke apart within the engine. The resulting explosion, but it also sent...
Okay, I went to another place because I am done eating, so let's go start this video again. Oh, but
Now what the flight crew don't realize is that even though all three hydraulic lines run separately, there is one section in the back of the plane where they come within close proximity, near the rear engine. Later investigations will reveal that within the engine, a fan disc had been produced using metal that was not completely pure, and this manufacturing defect went unnoticed. A crack began to form with each flight the aircraft took, until finally the disc couldn't hold anymore and broke apart within the engine. The resulting explosion severed the hydraulic lines to this rear engine, but it also sent shrapnel flying all around the area, towards the same section where the other two hydraulic lines come close together, severing them as well. The result was all lines bleeding hydraulic fluid until they were empty, leaving the flight crew helpless. At this very moment, a flight attendant comes to the cockpit to get an update on the situation. She can immediately tell things aren't good, and this is confirmed when Haynes tells her to ready the cabin for an emergency landing. Once she returns and begins instructing the other flight attendants to follow suit, she is stopped by a passenger sitting near the back of first class. He asks for information about what is going on, and he seems relatively calm given the situation. That is because he is no ordinary passenger. His name is Dennis Fitch, and he himself is a pilot. But not just any pilot. Fitch is actually a flight instructor for the DC-10, the very aircraft that they are on board. The flight attendant tells him that the rear engine is shut down and that the captain has reported that all hydraulics are lost. Fitch can't believe what he's hearing, as he knows this aircraft in and out and understands just how unlikely that could be. And yet, if it is true, he also knows that they are almost certainly doomed, because he has studied a previous flight that has had this exact same problem. Just 4 years before United Flight 232 departed on its fated flight, Japan Airlines Flight 123 takes off from Tokyo, en route to Osaka. It'll be a short flight, about 1 hour, but nonetheless, the journey will be made on a Boeing 747. These aircraft are known for their large size, and are more typically used for long-distance flights. However, this particular 747 variant is one specifically requested by Japan Airlines in response to high demand for certain domestic routes, such as between Tokyo and Osaka. With this model, fuel capacity is reduced in exchange for strengthening the structure of the aircraft to accommodate more frequent takeoffs and landings. And because it will be used for shorter flights, the business class section is reduced and the economy section is increased, allowing for more seats overall. No other airplane type had a higher capacity at the time, as this 747SR carried a staggering 524 people on this flight. But what no one on board knows is that something is happening in the back of the plane. Just a few years prior, this particular 747 was involved in a hard landing that resulted in a tail strike. There were even some injuries, but no casualties, and the plane needed some serious repairs, especially to the pressure bulkhead in the back of the plane. This is a curved wall that separates the pressurized air in the cabin from non-pressurized air, acting as a seal. Half of this bulkhead was damaged during the tail strike, and so repairs were carried out. The lower half dome of this bulkhead was therefore replaced. But this is where the fix wasn't done properly. In the correct installation, a single splice plate is used to connect both the upper and lower half of the bulkhead. This way, the loads are transmitted evenly across 3 rows of rivets. But during the repair, instead of using one single sheet, the splice plate was cut into 2 parts. This is a big mistake. The top rivet is essentially not carrying any load, as it's not even connected to the lower bulkhead anymore. And so, with each flight after the repair, cracks began to form around this area. And every flight the plane took, pressurizing and depressurizing the cabin, the cracks grew worse and worse. It was only a matter of time until the bulkhead couldn't hold anymore. Only 12 minutes into Flight 123, all 524 occupants feel an explosive decompression as the pressure bulkhead fractures. Pressurized air rushes into the space behind the bulkhead, an area not designed to handle the instantaneous pressure change. This causes more ruptures in the back of the plane, and the vertical tail fin blows off the aircraft. The explosion is so sudden that everything takes place in less than half a second, and oxygen masks drop as the cabin becomes depressurized. The flight crew immediately calls out to the Tokyo Control Tower and requests authorization to return to the airport. Permission is granted, though now the crew realizes a problem. Because just like United Flight 232, all hydraulic lines have been severed in the explosion caused by shrapnel flying out in the section where the lines come close together. The plane has become unflyable. With no controls and now a missing tail fin, the plane begins dipping forward and back. This is called phugoid motion. Essentially, as the plane descends, it gains airspeed. But this additional speed causes lift, which makes the plane climb. With no control surfaces to correct this motion, the plane continuously rises and dips in a wave-like pattern. The flight crew realizes that the only control they still have left is engine thrust, and so they begin increasing and decreasing the plane's 4 engines in an attempt to steer back towards Tokyo. If they want to take a right turn, they increase power on the left engines and lower power on the right. It is an extremely difficult process. But even still, the crew is able to make some progress in getting turned around to head back to Haneda Airport, and they are decreasing their altitude. But now, they have yet another problem looming ahead of them: the Japanese Alps.
It's just not fair how fast you move if you just choose the right road. So join XM and trade the world's top markets with
Japanese Alps. With little ability to control the plane, the crew do all they can to avoid the mountains. Ultimately, there's nothing that can be done. Bracing for impact, the plane crashes into a ridge just north of Mount Mikuni after nearly 30 minutes of flying in an uncontrollable plane. Rescuers immediately dispatched to the area, but the situation is dire. The 747 crashed high in the mountains, far past the point any road or path would reach, and with the sun taking away the last bit of daylight, it is virtually impossible to land a helicopter near the crash site. After flying over the burning debris, rescuers believe it is impossible that anyone could have survived. Nearly 14 hours after the crash, with the rising sun, rescuers finally reach the crash site, and here they discover a miracle: movement. They find a woman alive, though severely injured. Now seeing there is hope, the search is energized, and they find a child stuck in a tree. Searching more, they also find a mother and her daughter alive, trapped under debris. Though miraculous that 4 people have survived, it is coupled with the devastating realization that all 520 other occupants of Flight 123 have perished. And even more tragic is that doctors would later determine that more could have survived if rescuers had reached the crash site sooner. And with so many casualties, this crash becomes the deadliest one involving a single plane in history, even until this day. Back on board United Flight 232, just 4 years later, flight instructor Danny Fitch is more aware of this than any other passenger. Knowing that the Japan Airlines flight faced the same issue of losing all hydraulics, Fitch decides to offer his assistance to the flight crew, help that Captain Haynes readily accepts. Haynes explains to Fitch that they have been using differential engine thrusts to fly until this point. And Captain Haynes instructs Fitch to take over so that he and co-pilot Records can focus on other potential methods to get the plane safely to the ground. And so Fitch stands between the 2 pilots, a throttle in each hand, increasing and decreasing each based on visual cues and commands from Captain Haynes.
United 232 Heavy, understand, sir. You can only make right turns.
With over 400 miles left until they reach Chicago, the crew realizes that they will never make it. And with help from air traffic control, they locate a closer airport they can aim for, located in Sioux City, less than 100 miles away.
I have serious doubts about making the airport. If you got someplace near there that we might be able to get, let's get control of this airplane. We're going to put it down wherever it happens to be.
And he instructs the flight attendants to prepare everyone for a hard crash landing. Back in the cabin, the flight attendants begin instructing passengers on the positions to maintain when it's time to brace for impact. And as they look around, they are hit with the startling realization of just how many children are on board. As luck would have it, today is Children's Day, a promotion from United where children can fly for only a penny. There are 52 minors on Flight 232, and many of them are traveling alone. The flight attendants ask for help from several adult passengers, and everyone cooperates to make sure that no child is sitting by themselves. Next, they turn to the 4 children who were young enough to travel without a seat, those under 2 years old. The crew has no choice but to continue following procedure, and have their parents place their children on the floor in front of them and surround the children with pillows and hope for the best. Surround the children with pillows and hope for the best.
United 232 Heavy, you're down to wide now, just slightly to your left, sir, to make the turn to final, and also I'll take you away from the city. Whatever you do, keep on away from the city.
Back in the cockpit, the flight crew is steadily making way towards Sioux City. But the plane keeps pulling to the right. And so, deciding it would be best not to fight it, they corkscrew their way forward, with help from ATC providing directions and heading information. They also begin dumping as much fuel as they can, trying to decrease their weight before landing. And after 2 right-hand circles, it's time to do their first left turn in order to line up with the airport. But even after completing that turn, the plane still keeps drifting to the right, off the path towards the airport. And so, rather than keep fighting it, the crew decides to do another right-hand loop to get back on track.
United 232 Heavy, roger. The airport's currently at your 1 o'clock position, 10 miles. And United 232 Heavy, you can't make the airport, so there's an interstate that runs north to south to the east side of the airport. It's a 4-lane interstate. We're just passing right now. We're going to try to...
Finally, about 9 miles out of Sioux City, the pilots make visual contact with the airport. They've managed to make it this far, but now they have the worst yet to come as they still need to land. One other problem is that, without the hydraulics, the flaps which allow the aircraft to fly at much slower speeds for takeoff and landing cannot be extended. They are, however, able to manually lower the landing gear, letting gravity do the work of locking the wheels in place. And the extra drag from the landing gear helps reduce their speed a bit. But not by much, as they are still going more than double the speed of a typical landing. The entire airport lays open before them, with every runway available. Sioux City Airport has 3 runways, but only 2 of them were active at the time, as runway 22 had been closed permanently a year earlier. The crew hopes to use runway 31. Therefore, the closed runway 22 is used by emergency responders to set up and prepare themselves to assist for what they know will be a bad landing. But just 2 minutes before touchdown, Captain Haynes realizes that they aren't lined up at all for runway 31, and they don't have time to make corrections. But as luck would have it, they are lined up almost perfectly with runway 22.
United 232 Heavy, the wind's currently 360 at 11, 360 at 11, you're cleared to land on any runway. You want to be particular, make it a runway. 010 at 11, and there is a runway that's closed, so that could probably work too. The south, it runs northeast to southwest. Pretty well lined up on this one, I think we will be.
Immediately, responders rush to clear the closed runway and make way for the plane.
Yeah, that's a closed runway. That'll work, so we're getting equipment off the runway and they'll line up for that one. At the end of the runway, it's just a wide open field, so the lanes won't be a problem.
And with nothing left they can do, everyone straps in, and Captain Haynes calls out to the passengers to brace themselves.
Coming down real fast.
Oh my! Now there's that.
Unfortunately, despite the crew's best efforts, the uncontrollable plane finally gets the best of them. Just above the ground, the plane dips sharply to the right, and the right wing strikes the ground. The plane immediately begins breaking apart and ignites in a fireball as the wreckage continues skidding down the runway and into nearby cornfields. Emergency responders rush to the scene, and everyone fears it will be just like Japan Airlines all over again. And yet, as they approach, passengers begin streaming out of the wreckage. Responders begin evacuating and attending to any survivors they can find. And survivors themselves also assist each other. One man escapes the burning wreckage only to hear a baby crying from somewhere in the plane. Risking his own life, he goes back in and finds a baby which somehow during the impact became trapped in an overhead bin. He is able to escape with the child, reuniting her back with her mother. And outside, responders also attempt to locate the cockpit, which broke apart during the impact. It takes them 40 minutes, but finally they discover its broken and charred remains after seeing Flight Engineer Drojak waving his arms from the wreckage. Captain Haynes, co-pilot Records, Flight Engineer Drojak, and Flight Instructor Fitch are all alive, though in critical condition. They are freed from the wreckage and join the other survivors who are now being raced to the nearby trauma center. By the end of the rescue efforts, it's a bitter moment. 113 people perished after the crash, including 11 children. It is a situation that no one should have walked away from, a crash that seemed impossible to survive. And yet, 183 people made it. A combination of skill from the crew, good communication, and a little bit of luck meant that more than half of Flight 232 lived to see another day.
Baik guys, tengok ni ya. Dalam tank kosong ada 893 ringgit ekor.
A little bit of luck meant that more than half of Flight 232 lived to see another day. Now, both these crashes unfolded under completely different circumstances. The United flight lost its hydraulics over one of the flattest parts of the United States, while Japan Airlines found itself over mountainous terrain. They were flying different aircraft with vastly different mass and control characteristics. And crucially, Japan Airlines had lost its vertical stabilizer, a failure that made a controlled landing physically impossible. And the fact that the crew managed to keep the aircraft in the air for over half an hour is nothing short of extraordinary. But what these two incidents do have in common is that they reveal just how catastrophic the loss of all hydraulics can be. And they also have something else in common. To this day, both incidents are regarded as some of the most remarkable examples of pilot skill. United 232 is often cited as one of the clearest examples of crew resource management in action. A captain, first officer, flight engineer, and even a training captain, all working together, sharing control inputs, and communicating constantly. But aviation didn't always operate that way, and in fact the culture that made that kind of collaboration possible was born out of tragedy. One famous example of bad communication leading to tragedy is the Tenerife disaster in 1977. When two 747s filled with passengers collided almost head-on on the runway. The absolute worst-case scenario. And to understand how this happened, I created a full-length video detailing the exact radio exchanges and mapping out the chain of events that led to the collision. This video is part of an entire series of videos I created called Underexposure. In this series, I created in-depth documentaries about high-stakes events that reshaped our world. And this series is exclusive to Nebula, which is a streaming service that I am building together with other like-minded creators. Now, the idea behind Nebula is to let creators you already watch on YouTube make the stuff they really want to make. Bigger, higher budget, and without relying.
Okay, this is the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. You